Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Force here with some more Neverwinter coverage, and I've got a special treat for you guys today. I'm actually going to be showing you a full run-through of a 5-man dungeon. This is called the Throne of Idris. It's a dungeon in the level range between 35 and 40, and currently you're seeing me play as my control wizard. Now, just so you know, this footage is coming from the last beta weekend event, which was actually the final beta weekend event before the game goes into open beta, which will be happening, well, actually next week. Come to think of it, or at least the early access to the open beta starts next week. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. Lots of people I know have been looking forward to this game. It seems that every time I put up some footage of Neverwinter, it gets a great response. The views are typically really good, and there seems to be a lot of interaction and a lot of discussion in those videos. So that leads me to believe that there's a lot of people out there, at least in my viewer base, who are really stoked about Neverwinter. So I am excited for that reason to be showing you guys some more Neverwinter footage. And what I'd like to do in this video, besides showing you the run-through, is I just want to sort of give you some of my thoughts of Neverwinter thus far. You know, I've played in every single one of the beta events with the exception of one of them, just because I was busy visiting family that weekend. I don't remember which one that was, but I think it was beta weekend 3 or something, or 2, but I've played in pretty much all of the beta weekend events, and I've played of the currently available classes, which there are 5, the Great Weapon Fighter, the Guardian Fighter, the Trickster Rogue, the Divine Cleric, and the Control Wizard. I've played at least every single one of them a little bit, and I've put in a fair amount of time to the Trickster Rogue, the Control Wizard, and the Guardian Fighter. So I think I'm in a good position to sort of give you guys some of my final thoughts as we enter the open beta. Now, obviously the game is still in beta. There's still plenty of room for improvement and growth and all sorts of things like that. But I kind of want to let you guys know where I stand. Now, I've talked a whole bunch, but I really haven't properly introduced the game. So if you're new to Neverwinter, if you haven't seen videos on the game before, this is an upcoming free-to-play MMORPG from Cryptic Studios. Now that is the developer. The game is being published by Perfect World Entertainment. And if you know anything about MMOs, you've probably heard about Perfect World before. They're pretty well known for their free-to-play games, and to a lot of people, they're also known for making games that could be considered sort of pay-to-win, at least in one aspect or another. Now, I am still kind of on the fence as to whether or not I feel that Neverwinter is pay-to-win. I feel like there are some aspects of it that could be considered that, but I don't want to dive into that quite yet before we really focus on that. I want to talk with you guys about the combat system, about the gameplay, and everything that you're seeing here in front of you. So the dungeons, and let me make a correction to a prior video. Not too long ago I put out a video of a skirmish that I called a dungeon. There's a clear difference between the two that I think it's important for you guys to know. They're both PvE instances, but skirmishes are these sort of short, typically 15 to 20 minute events, whereas these dungeons are usually lasting on average 45 minutes to an hour. So there's definitely a difference between those two things, and it's definitely important to realize that, and I apologize for that mistake in the past. But yes, the skirmishes are just sort of like mini dungeons, if you will. They're just these little events that you'll go to with a group of total group of 5 people, so you and 4 other people, and you'll kill some enemies, and you'll get, you know, you'll get some loot as well. I mean, in its essence, it works just like a dungeon does. It's just a shorter variation of it. But this is a full-fledged dungeon. It takes a fair amount of time. These runs, again, take between 45 minutes to an hour, so you guys are going to get plenty of gameplay here in this video. And let's just talk about that gameplay. So the biggest thing about this game, and I think the reason that I personally have continuously been going back to it, is the impactfulness of the combat, which is something that I've touched on in prior videos, and something that I'll probably continue to talk about because it's one of my big draws to this game. So the combat system itself, this is an action-oriented combat, and what that means is that things, while some abilities are locked, there is player skill involved in terms of whether or not you get hit. And that skill comes in the form of what we'll call the avoidance system. So depending on the class that you have, you either have a blink, like my control wizard here has, or you've got a dodge or a block. So like the Trickster Rogue has the ability to do this dodge roll, and the Guardian Fighter has this ability to block. All those systems sort of function in the same way, is that they mitigate or allow you to avoid incoming damage. So if there's a missile projectile coming at me, now, like you'll see my control wizard here, I'll be casting some abilities, and some of them are sort of a frontal cone where someone could just move out of the way, but some of them, like my magic missile here that you're seeing me toss continuously, that's an ability that it is locked on target, but if that target, we're talking about PvP primarily here, if that target dodges or does their roll or does their block, they can mitigate or avoid that damage. So it's skill based in that sense. It's skill based in that although there is a lock system to some of the ranged abilities, you can avoid it if you know what you're doing. So that's the sort of action combat that we're talking about. Now it's not quite as free form, I guess, as I would call a game like Monster Hunter or a game like Terra, where I think there's a little bit more. I would consider that much more in line with an action combat focused game, but this definitely still has the primary aspects of it. The problem with this is that your ability to mitigate or avoid damage through the blinking or through the dodging or through the blocking, that's all restricted by a resource. So you can only blink so many times before you run out of the resource, and you have to wait for it to recharge before you can do it again. Whereas in some other action combat focused games, you have unlimited ability to dodge and weave, if you will. So there is that, but the combat itself, the impactfulness of the combat, which is broken down into the way enemies react to what you hit them with, and then also a slight screen shake, which I know that's something that bothers lots of people. I can understand it too. It's something that me personally, I don't get bothered by it. Just like some people have issues with FOV in a game for first-person shooters. You know, you're not seeing at the right angle. It sort of messes with your perception, what your eyes are typically used to seeing, and in turn that makes people nauseous because it's kind of throwing you off your equilibrium. Well, what am I even talking about here? So equating that to screen shaking is just something that can make some people a little sick. And if that's the case, then you might be a little bothered right now, because even on my wizard, you're going to notice continuous screen shaking here. And if it's not something you were paying attention to prior to me talking about it, just pay really close attention to the edges of the screen whenever I'm casting an ability that hits an opponent. You're going to notice this little twitch, this little shake that is constantly occurring every single time I hit an opponent. So that does two things. Number one, it adds impactfulness and weight behind your abilities. And then the second part of that equation, the second part of feeling like the combat is really hard hitting, is whenever you strike an opponent, they get stuttered back, they get knocked back, and it really seems like there is some weight there. So that is something that I really like in video games. I think especially in RPGs, it's something that it just makes you really feel like your character's really powerful, and look at the damage and the harm that you're causing to your opponent. And yeah, that is a part of this system that I really like. Now, another aspect of the combat, this is very polarizing, depending on your perception of how this system would work. I'd sort of caution you to at least give it a shot. So what I'm specifically referring to here is the sort of, I just spent so much time talking about how impactful the combat is and the action focus, but at the same time, this is a game that when you're casting an ability, when you're doing an attack, you are rooted in place. So as opposed to a completely free-form action combat where you can run around swinging, whenever you do an attack in this game, your character is stuck in place. Now, it's not just the case for you, it is also the case for anyone you're fighting. So all of your opponents, be it real player or enemy AI or NPCs here in these dungeons, every time an attack is done, the character is rooted in place. Now, it's interesting to me because this is a system where prior to me actually playing it, if you were to have told me, Force, what do you think about a combat system that every time you strike, your character is rooted? I would have said, I don't like that. I'm not interested in that. Just sort of philosophically, I like the ability for a skill-based in the terms of you can constantly react to what's going on by dodging and moving and continuously sort of hopping around. So innately, I would have said, no, that sounds crappy, I think that's a terrible system, but after spending a significant amount of time with this game, it really didn't bother me at all, and I didn't feel like my character was sluggish like I guess you would expect to, because of the fact that I could always, if there was something incoming, and because of the way the system's designed where a lot of the heavy hitting attacks, there's a lot of telegraphing to a lot of things that are occurring. So if there's a big attack coming from a boss, or if there's a big attack just coming from an enemy character, you'll know enough ahead of time to dodge out of the way and stop your attacks, so that you're not just standing there taking the brunt of that upcoming assault. So it's weird to me, because again, I think it's a system that I philosophically don't necessarily enjoy, but after experiencing it, I said, hey, you know what, this really isn't bad, and I'm having a fun time with it. So yeah, again, I'd caution people to not be super judgmental of that unless you've actually played through it and experienced it. And I think that's the other great thing about this game, and the reason I think some people are excited is because it is a free-to-play game. You know, there's no barrier to entry, with the exception of the time it's going to take you to download this title, create an account, download the title, and log in. You don't have to, it's not going to interrupt your day, or not going to punish your wallet or anything like that. You can just hop right in and give it a shot, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you uninstall the game, and you wasted, what, maybe an hour or so? Or not, it's not like you have to sit there and wait for the thing to download. So yeah, I mean, the fact that it's a free-to-play game, I'm really excited for people to at least check it out and give it a shot, because to be perfectly honest with you, looking at this game on its face before I ever played it, just taking a look at screenshots, I said, and then hearing about the type of game that it was, and hearing that this was a big thing for me too, I'll be perfectly honest with you. Hearing that it was being published by Perfect World, a company that I associate with just MMOs, not low-quality MMOs, but MMOs that I normally don't enjoy, my expectations were really low. I did not think that this was going to be a fun game. I did not think it was going to be a game that I liked, but every time a beta weekend came up, I said, yeah, I want to play that again, and I kept coming back and I kept playing it. So it's pretty good. It is a pretty good game, and it's still, you know, we're still in the beta phase testing. The game is not complete, and they're still going to be making improvements and additions to the game, and all sorts of fun stuff like that. So it's a really good sign for me that I've continuously gone back, and I think I have to understand my position to understand how big of a deal that is. You know, I play brand new games every week, all week. Every single day I'm playing a brand new title to do coverage for it on my channel, be it a title that just released or a title that's in alpha or beta phase that's coming up. I'm constantly playing brand new games, and there's such a long list of games, even on my back catalog, games that came out weeks ago that I still haven't gotten around to visiting, that I want to visit and do coverage on for the YouTube channel and for my website. There's just always something new for me to be trying. So every time I go back to a game that I've already covered, I'm immediately thinking, well, why is that? Like, there's obviously something to this that keeps drawing me back and that has kept me interested. And I just think it comes down to the fact that I think the combat in this game is excellent. I really, really do. And it's again, it's going to be one of those things that's a preference, because if you really won't enjoy the rooted combat, and if you really don't like something like screen shaking, well, that could be a problem. Now, I'm not sure if if they have the option to turn it off. I hope they do, because I would imagine that's something that, you know, could be sort of switched on and off at a player's leisure, and if some people don't like that, they'd want to turn it off. But it does add to the weight, like we talked about earlier here in the video. So I don't even know if they'd want to do that that could potentially harm the game or people's perception of the game if they turn it off either on accident or on purpose. But yeah, again, with my position, with the constant flood of games and the huge back catalog of games that I have to visit, the fact that I've continuously gone back to this, I think it's a good sign for someone of my tastes. So if you feel like you share similar taste in games with me, which I guess you could sort of figure out over time by listening to my opinions on the games that I cover. If you think that you have a similar taste to me in video games, you should give this a shot. There's really no question about this. And it's exciting for you because the game's going into open beta very, very shortly. Actually, at the end of the month, on April 30th is when the open beta does occur. And then they've got some Neverwinter Founder Early Access. So basically, if you signed up as a founder, there were 2 packages. One of them sort of reasonable, the other one absurdly priced, but if you signed up as a founder, then you can get access as much as 5 days early to the open beta. And because it's a free-to-play game, the assumption here is that the open beta will just roll into a soft launch, until a hard launch, and then there shouldn't be any character deletes beyond that. Now, I think that they've done character removal and deleted characters from the beta weekend events that have taken place, but I believe, again, once it goes into open beta, you'll just have your character from that point up until the game's actual launch. So definitely give this game a look if you just want to experience some good combat, some entertaining combat. And the world's kind of cool too, you know? I'll be honest with you, and this is going to sound weird to a lot of people, I think. I've never been a huge Dungeons and Dragons guy. I know, crazy, right? It just was never something that I got into. It's not because I don't think I would be interested in it, but when I was a kid, the sort of things that took up my time were I read a lot of fantasy novels, and I played a lot of Magic the Gathering, and I played a lot of video games, be it on computer or console. And actually, when I was a kid, I played a lot of console, but it's funny, now as an adult, I'm primarily PC gamer, although we'll see if that'll switch around once the next console generation comes out. But none of that's important. The important thing is that, you know, I guess my fantasy needs as a child, they were filled by video games, by Magic the Gathering, and by reading. So I just never ended up, my circle of friends were just never really, we never really spent much time in Dungeons and Dragons. Now, the Neverwinter, from what I understand, and please D&D fans, don't jump on my back here, but I understand that the Neverwinter saga, if you will, is just part of the Dungeons & Dragons universe, the part of the Dungeons & Dragons franchise. So that's going to be another draw for some people to this game. If you are a Dungeons & Dragons person, then you're going to get, I think, a lot of subtle things in this title that I don't even get. Like, I don't identify with the characters and the storyline because I don't really identify with D&D. So that's again going to be another draw for fans of the D&D franchise, being able to, I guess, experience those characters and the world of Neverwinter in an MMO experience. And I don't even know if I have actually touched on this before either, so I'd like to talk about this here as well. How is the world set up? This is an instanced game in the fullest sense of the word. It is not an open world experience. I cannot, you know, let's just say we've got our main town. I cannot just walk out of my main town and walk around the world, which is something like you see in, for example, World of Warcraft. I mean, that is a game, it certainly has its instances, its dungeons and things like that, and there are certainly load screens between major continents, but, you know, if I walk out of, I don't know, Stormwind, and I can just walk up and down that entire continent there and just go free form from one place to the next. That is not the case here in this game. It is severely instanced. Every single little area has a different load screen. You basically go through these gates from one area to the other. And normally, once more, this is one of those things that I say, ugh, gross. I don't like instanced MMOs, but it didn't really bother me in this game. And this game also has some really nice set pieces that I think maybe led to part of the reason that I wasn't bothered. It just got some really interesting looking towns and some really interesting looking environments, and so I wasn't too turned off by the severe breakup and sort of the immersion breaking, in my opinion, the immersion breaking load screens in between every single zone. But that is the case with this game. It's just plain to be said there. Just so you guys know, it's not a massive open world that you explore. You're going to be experiencing loading screens in between every single zone that you go through. So something to keep in mind if that's something that you don't enjoy, but once more, I caution people, even if you've got preconceived notions about these different sorts of things in games, it's a free-to-play game, so just give it a shot. You know, what harm is it going to do? Really none whatsoever. And if it matters at all to anyone watching this video, it does get my seal of approval, at least in the combat aspect. And the PvP seems pretty interesting as well. I've done a couple of videos on that. You know, it is interesting having a sort of locked-in, rooted combat for a player versus player environment. But I had fun with the few PvP runs that I did. I did a couple of run-throughs with the Trickster Rogue and a couple with the Control Wizard. I would say that I enjoyed the Control Wizard more, but I was a lot more successful with the Trickster Rogue. It seems, at least as of the last beta weekend event, that the melee characters really have a one-up in terms of getting killing blows and just dropping characters pretty quick. Now, part of the problem there could also be the control wizard, while damage dealing, is more focused on crowd control. So, and that actually leads me to another thing, is that the classes in this game. So like we mentioned earlier in the video, as of this very moment, 5 classes. Great Weapon Fighter, which is sort of just like a two-handed warrior. Guardian Fighter, which is basically your tank. The Trickster Rogue, that's a rogue, assassin if you will. The Divine Cleric is your healer. And then the Control Wizard is a crowd control focused wizard. You know, I'm sure you figured that out with the name Control Wizard. So that might have been part of the problem. I wasn't really landing nearly as many kills with Control Wizard because she's more focused on CC, even though, you know, you've got some agency because you do get to pick your skills, and we can also walk into that as well and talk about the skill system a little bit. But I don't know, it's something I've heard that they're supposed to be adding more classes. I apologize for not knowing precisely what classes they plan to add, if that's going to happen during the open beta, if it's going to happen at all before launch, or if this is something that's coming with expansions. And maybe this is something that the lovely people, you guys in the comment section, could just let everyone else know. Do we know what's going on with other classes? Are we going to get like a full-on damage wizard? Are we going to get an archer? I mean, that's something that was like I really wanted to try a ranged class, an archer, a bowman, whatever. And that was not present at all. We had 2 warriors, but no archer. So I was a little confused about that. I'm assuming that those things are coming eventually. I hope they come before launch. I'd like them to at least cover all the standard archetypes of RPG, MMO sort of, you know, what people expect. And a ranger of sorts would be nice. The rogue can throw daggers, basically, but that's not really the same thing, so yeah, that would be nice if we eventually see a little bit more variety in terms of the classes. So yeah, let me know, and let everyone else watching this video know in the comment section, if you know and you are watching this, what do they plan to do with classes? Are we going to be getting more sometime soon? That'd be nice. So let's go ahead and talk about the skill system. So the way the skill system works right now, in terms of its most recent iteration, because it has changed at least a couple of times during the beta, is that as you level your character up, you basically work your way through these tiers, and as you level, you unlock different skills, but you can only select a few skills. So it's a system that sort of works like a Diablo, if you will. You've got a set number of skills that you can pick from. While there are more available, when you're fighting, you only have access to so many. So you've got there are these different skills. There's like at-will skills, encounter skills, and then there are daily powers, which it's so funny that they call them daily powers. My understanding is that's something that pulls over just from D&D, just the way D&D is structured. There's these things called daily powers. They're not really, as you would assume, once a day. There are powers that are on a somewhat lengthy cooldown, because you have to wait for your action points to build up, which takes time in combat, but you don't get to just use them once a day. They're basically just like an ultimate. That's a better phrasing for it. But again, my understanding is that they're just staying true to Dungeons and Dragons, and daily powers is terminology that's used within that world. So yeah, you've got access to a few different things. Again, there's at will, encounter, and then daily powers. And then there's also these passives as well that you've got access to. You've got access to 2 passives. I believe it's 4, or is it 2 skill and 4 at will, or no, 4 encounter and 2 at will. I think that's the breakdown, but there's just a breakdown of these different types of skills, and then you unlock them as you level up. And then beyond that, there's also customization where you've got these attribute points that you can increase, and that all sticks to Dungeons and Dragons. We've got like charisma, intelligence, I think strength. There's an entire list of those. But yeah, you've got these attribute points that you can level up, and all sorts of fun stuff like that. And then there's also another progression system, and I can't think of the wording for it at the moment. And again, because the beta's not going on right now, it's all done, and this is all footage coming from before the beta ended, so I can't just hop in the game and check out what it is. But there's also this other progression system that you can unlock passive increases as well. It's different from your 2 skill passives. These are passives that will, say, add a better chance to get a critical strike, or you can get more action points in combat, or your encounter skills cool down faster. So there's this whole progression, and it's broken up into 3 tiers there as well. So there's a fair amount of customization besides your skill system. Again, there are the attribute points, and then there's that other progression tree for getting passive increases for your character as well. So there's a whole lot of sort of tinkering that you can do. Ooh, and here we go. We're coming up to our first big boss fight, Dire Helm Forge. How exciting. So you just basically listen to me for the past what is this, 25 minutes now, just chattering about Neverwinter, clearing trash mobs in an instance. Boy, but I know people are really excited to look at Neverwinter gameplay, so I guess it's okay. So yeah, we got our first boss coming up, and people were like, WTF, mate, what do we do? I don't know. Let's just go kill things. We've got this quest here that says destroy the Forge Shard, so I guess we should try to find out what those are and kill those. The dungeon was pretty cool. It was pretty fun. I just, sometimes I feel like, especially with these big trash mobs packs, I mean, again, the first 25 minutes were basically just trash mobs. It kind of gets a little old, but I know that this is the type of thing that a lot of people are looking for. And this is a really cool, you'll notice those big purple globs there. I don't know if this is unique to the instance or just a certain enemy type, but those things are really cool. We've got these basically large, slow-moving projectiles, which are super powerful. So if you're not paying attention and you get caught by one of them, you're kind of in trouble. Look at that big purple ball just sort of moving through. It's so funny, and I love how I almost just back up into it there. So yeah, I thought that was just really neat. I thought that was really cool. First time I saw that. So yeah, the skill system, it is what it is. Now you can switch out your skills. You can switch out your skills basically when you're out of combat and pick up a different skill set. But something that I found, especially while leveling up, is that the skills also have tiers. So there's 3 levels. Yeah, it's 3 levels for each skill, and every time you level up, you get a point to spend in one of your skills. So for example, if I want to use magic missiles, I ideally want to spend all 3 points into it to make it as effective as possible. So it's not just you unlock a skill and then you have that skill and that's that. You can further improve it with additional skill points up to 3 times. So there is that as well. So it made it for me while I was leveling up. Oh, and this is another thing we can talk about. It made it for me while I was leveling up that I sort of had to look at my tree and pick a build that I wanted, and then dump all my points 3 times into those skills. Because obviously if I want to use a skill, I want it to be as effective as possible, but using a skill that only has 1 point in it, you know, it's kind of crappy. So I basically had to pick my build, and the first build that I went here with the Control Wizard, and I actually talked about this in my last video, I first went with like an ice focus build, so it's sort of more CC, and then I decided, I want to go more damage focus, so I kind of switched up to sort of arcane focus, and in doing so I had to respec, and to respec you had to spend real world money or accumulate a crazy amount of these astral tokens, astral coins. You have to accumulate a crazy amount of those and try to trade them with other players for the real-world currency equivalent in this game to respec. So I touched on this in the last video. I said how I thought it was kind of crappy that they're essentially trying to make you pay to do a respec, and I had some pushback from that comment from people who said, oh, you want everything for free? You don't want the developer to make money? No, I'm not an idiot. Like, I cover a lot of games, and I fully support developers. In fact, a lot of times when there's a game that I like, I purchase a Founders Package, which usually runs like 60 to 100 bucks. I did that with Firefall. I spent 100 bucks on Firefall, and I spent money for the Founders Package here in Neverwinter as well. I like the game. I want to support the developer, but I'll tell you this right now. I would rather this game be $60 up front, or, you know, you get it for free but you pay a subscription fee, than have to pay every time you want to respec, because there's a few problems with that. One of the major problems is that it completely discourages playing around with different builds. Unless they implement a system, or maybe there is one that I don't know of, unless they've got a system where you can have multiple specs on your character that you can just switch between, like a dual spec system, unless that exists, you know, so you're going to have a character with a PvE build and they're going to suck in PvP. I mean, let's not kid ourselves here. There's a clear difference between the type of skills that you want for PvP and the type of skills you want for PvE. Here's a great example, a Trickster Rogue. Playing the Trickster Rogue, I had the option to get a skill which made me sort of temporarily immune to damage or something like that, or high resistance to damage, and also broke all crowd control effects. That is a PvP ability. Sure, it has its uses in some PvP cases, maybe for certain boss fights, but most of the time for PvE, you're primarily focusing on high damage and reducing threat when you're a damage-dealing character in an MMO. So having an ability that breaks CC, that is not at the top of your focus, especially in this sort of a game where you've got limited skills. So the point is that there are clearly abilities that are primarily designed for PvE, player versus environment, and PvP, player versus player. And to have to, unless there's a dual spec system, to have to respec every time you want to switch between a PvP and a PvE build, let alone, even if that's not the case, if you're just a PvEer and you want to try multiple specs, to basically be incentivized to spend money, which was like $2.50 or $5 is basically what it ended up costing to respec with that conversion rate there. That is crappy. And I am all for supporting the developer, and I am all for them making money. But you look at a lot of other free-to-play games, and what they do is they do vanity items, or they do convenience items. Respecking is not a convenience. That should be, nowadays, in an RPG, that should be a given. Respecking, trying new things, fiddling around with your character, that should be a given. And so that's my problem with that particular thing. Now, who's to say that a lot of these MMOs who don't charge to respec and just charge for vanity items, who's to say how they're going to hold up in the long run? You know, this whole free-to-play movement, this is a relatively new thing, and the games that are free-to-play have only been doing so for a handful of years now. It's not like this has been occurring on average. Maybe there's select instances of games that you could point to, but across the industry, this whole free-to-play movement has only been going on for, I don't know, what are we looking at here? Sometime between 5 and 10 years, not even 10 years. We got to be close to only the 5-year mark, right? I mean, this is a relatively new thing. So who's to say how in the long term the MMOs who don't have, or who only focus on vanity items, who's to say how they're going to hold up, and who's to say how those developers, how long they're going to stay in business with that sort of a model? Maybe Perfect World has a right, and they say, if we really want this to stay in business and to consistently make enough money without charging $60 up front and without charging subscription fee, then we are going to need to charge people for some pretty important things, such as respecking. Maybe that's the case, and if that's the case, well, then they've got it right. But if that's not the case, and if it's true that just the vanity items and the convenience items, like, I don't know, bonus XP or something, like you get 5% more XP, although typically it's higher than that in games. Typically it's anywhere between like 15 and 30% extra bonus XP. But, you know, charging for those things as opposed to charging for what I consider essential aspects of an RPG game, like respecking, maybe they've got it right, and who knows? I guess we'll find out. But to me right now, looking at the way the free-to-play market currently is, charging for respecs is kind of a crummy thing to do. But again, they could have it right, and I could not know what I'm talking about, which is probably most likely the case. All right, so it sort of ranted on about that a little bit. I just wanted to get that off my chest and share my opinion. At the end of the day, though, I guess the point is that I don't not want the developer to make money. I would be more than happy to spend $60 for a box. I just feel kind of ripped off when I get charged every time I want to try a new spec, or every time I want to switch my character from PvP to PvE focused, which would result in me wanting different skills in this sort of a system that forces you into a limited skill set. That's all I'm trying to say. That is all I'm trying to say. And I probably supported the developer a lot more than anyone watching this video. Besides basically advertising for them and making these things, I bought a Founders Package as well, which I'm sure a majority of people who play the game won't do. They'll just fully take advantage of the free-to-play. So that is that. Let's move on. Rant is over. We just finished our first big boss fight here, and we're going to take a look at some of the equipment, and unfortunately I don't have any scroll identifies, so, which is really a big bummer. Something else that I found too, another thing that's sort of pointing to they're sort of incentivizing you to spend money is, man, my bag space was really crappy. I'm assuming you can just get bags within the game, though. I just really didn't ever bother looking how to do that. I was just so focused on, let me run dungeons, let me do PvP. We've got limited time here on these beta weekends. I want to play as much as possible. Wasn't too focused on finding new bags. But it was definitely the case that I was feeling the crunch when it came to bag space, and I was always running out of identify scrolls and stuff like that. Okay, so we're coming up on the final boss here. We've got a bunch of trash to clear before we run up into her, and then that sounded really creepy. Sorry. I do not mean to be that guy. I can't even believe I made that connection for you guys, too. Now you don't even... now the trolls don't have to do it for me. I did it for myself. There you go. Alright, so a bunch of fun little trash mobs here. This was a cool little boss fight. Also taking advantage of the big purple scary globs. And just wait till you see this boss fight. It's absolutely insane. So let's sort of pull things in here. Let's pull things back. I've talked a bit about a fair amount of the systems here in this game. I think the one thing that I really haven't touched on, and the one thing that I never get around to doing is a video for, is the Foundry system. So let me talk with you about the Foundry system. This is a really cool system. Things similar to this have been done in other MMOs, but I found this to be really, really cool. They have the Foundry system that allows for user-created content, and the way it works is they've basically got this pretty elaborate editor where you can go in, you can pick a setting, and you can set up player NPCs, you can set up enemy NPCs, you can set up events that will occur. You basically make quest lines. So it's a system that allows for user-created content to make quest lines for other people to experience. Now there's a few things they do really right with the Foundry system. Number one, it's all scaled to level. So no matter what level you are, you can do any quest within the Foundry system that another player has created, and it will be equivalent to your level. What's more is that the rewards are also scaled to your level. So the rewards, as far as I understand, it's not necessarily just, you know, the person who creates a quest picks, you get the sword of striking, that's like a level 10 sword that does 5 to 10 damage or something. No, the rewards are basically equivalent to developer quest within the game. So normal quest in the game, the rewards you get from these Foundry quests that are player created are equivalent. So it makes it so that you actually have a good reason to want to do it, because the reward you're going to get will be the same as any other quest that you'd be doing as that level anyway. And it's also got this voting system so that the players can vote their favorite Foundry quest to the top, so that other players can see and participate in those quests. So it's a really cool system, and the great thing about it is that if the community is there and consistently making quests within the Foundry system, talk about adding a lot to the game. I mean, this is why, allowing for modding in games can really pump up the longevity, because when you let your player base design quests for you, and actually what you're going to see here at the later part of this video, sorry to cut my thought off there, but you're going to see me protecting the healer a lot, which it didn't really seem like anyone else was doing, but our healer was getting chased a ton by pulling up a ton of aggro from healing, obviously. And so I tried to spend a lot of time being a control wizard, trying to force enemies off of her. But yeah, I think the Foundry system is really awesome, and it's unique for me because I personally haven't played MMOs that had that system or a similar system in the past. I know they exist. I've read people talking about it, but I personally haven't done it. So I really enjoyed it. I spent a little bit of time playing through a few different quests, and they were all completely different. Again, uniquely tailored. Some of them reused environments that I'd previously been to, but some of them were environments that I had never been to. So I found it pretty interesting. And that's definitely a great addition to the game to add to its longevity. No question about that. So let's continue to clear these trash and come up to the boss fight, the final boss here in the Throne of Idris. She's a scary lady. So final thoughts, let's wrap this up here. I know I just said I was going to do that, but my final thoughts are, I like it. I think it's a fun game. I really enjoy the combat. I'm concerned about some of the store options in this game. I'm concerned about the fact that you can pay for a respec, or that you pretty much have to pay for a respec unless you grind these astral diamonds to do like that little conversion. But you don't have to, I guess you don't have to do that, right? You don't have to. It sucks that it is that way. I wish that it wasn't, but knowing that ahead of time, I'll caution you, all right? Look carefully at your character. Think about the character that you want to build before you start spending any points. So what this will require you to do, unfortunately enough, and it sucks because this is such an archaic way of doing things, you're going to want to go online ahead of time, look at all the possibilities that your character has for skills, and then basically pick the sort of build that you want. And then if you have to respec, hopefully you've got enough astral diamonds to do that. Otherwise, you'll be spending some money in the shop. So yeah, it's kind of crappy. And here's another thing too, which this I found really sort of facepalm insulting. You can pay to mass resurrect your team in a dungeon. So another thing that sort of makes it feel like this is a little pay to win, because if your team keeps wiping during boss encounters, all that needs to happen is one of your teammates with some extra money who wants to just dump it into this game can pay to consistently res your entire team, so you can keep doing the boss fight over and over and over again. Basically just sort of swarming it, zerging it, if you will. So yeah, I didn't like that so much, but what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Alright, so here we go. Final boss here in the Throne of Idris, and I think I will just conclude my thoughts on this game. Again, I think it's worth checking out. At the very least, give it a look. Open beta starts on April 30th. We're really close there. And try it out. See what you think. If you hate it, if you really dislike some of the things that I've talked about here in this video, well, that's fine. It didn't cost anything to try, so there you have it. The huge benefit to the free-to-play movement. You can try lots of things, and if you don't like it, you can move on, or you can just bitch about it anyways, because you know how people love to do that. Alright guys, I'm going to let you enjoy this final battle here without my commentary, and that will wrap it up. There will probably be some more Neverwinter coverage from me once the game goes in open beta. In terms of how exactly that's going to formulate and what exactly I'll be doing, I don't know, but there'll probably be something. Alright, thanks so much for watching. If you guys like the content, please subscribe. Enjoy the last few minutes of the Neverwinter boss fight. This thing was crazy. Keep watching and keep owning.